Hey everyone, it's Helen Baratta with First Place for Health, and I am so honored to have Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith and Dr. Elizabeth Berbano with us today. I asked each of them to join us to talk together. They both speak a language that I love. They talk about science and our bodies and how things work together. And so I thought it would be interesting for all of us if we ask the doctors their opinions about different things about how our body works, especially when it comes to our weight loss, our wellness journey, and how that looks and feels. So I'm going to just start by throwing it out, and I've heard them both talk about different things over time. So I'm going to start with nutrition, which is kind of one of my favorite topics, and just ask them from their opinion. There's a lot of different kinds of diets and foods out there. And so how do they feel about getting our nutrition, our supplements, our vitamins? What is their recommendation to us and their patients as far as getting everything we need from food? So maybe Dr. Saundra, could you start?
Yeah, happy to. Well, whenever I hear someone ask about nutrition, the first thing that comes to mind, and often that usually patients are asking me, are about specific diets. What do you think about keto, paleo, all the other names that are out there, and their effect on my health, and should I do them, and all these things. I think for the very first aspect of nutrition, whenever I think about that, is that really at no point in time should entire food groups be completely removed from your diet. I think whenever you get to a situation where you are so severely limiting certain food groups, you put yourself at risk for being deficient in some type of nutrients. Really, as far as the supplements, they shouldn't be necessary for the majority of us. Most of what you need, you should be able to get from the food that you're consuming within your day. Even if you're lowering your calories because you're trying to lose weight or trying to, fine tune your health, you should still be able to get most of your nutrients through those foods that you're eating if you make some wise choices. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, you can just have whatever you want, because if you're trying to get all of your vitamins through food, you're going to have to make sure you are getting adequate amounts of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and all of these things. And I think that's kind of where people fall into problems if they're trying to completely omit certain groups of foods. For example, if you're trying to completely get your carbohydrate grams down to under 20 per day, you're going to likely not get enough B vitamins because you're not eating anything that has them in them. So you're going to, run the risk of being deficient. And I just don't feel like that's a healthy or sustainable, way of maintaining your weight or even losing weight. I'd like to hear what Dr. Liz has to say.
Excellent. I always love talking with you, Dr. Saundra. So excellent. I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of supplements and trying to get what we need, focusing on whole foods. And, I wanted to go back to something that Ellen was saying. This might have been before we came on, but you mentioned that a lot of what you talk about is the USDA MyPlate, your basis. And so this is interesting because every 5 years, and it's on the 0 and the 5, the MyPlate is updated. So 2020, it was updated. And they actually have changed one of the groups, the group that we used to call the meat group. It says protein now when you look at it. And if you look at the notes, and this is what people should look at so they don't think of, way back when we used to think meat group. And we used to think, okay, our proteins need to be a meat. That's why I eat meat. If you read the fine print, we start also including or looking to vegetables for healthy proteins as well. So that should be something that's discussed. So over time, the MyPlate has evolved to talk about healthier proteins. We always say that term lean meats, but I do want to say that there are leaner meats, and red meat, I'm going to put it out there, this might be new for folks, but is carcinogenic. That's like revolutionary, right? I want you to look at the WHO World Health Organization report from 2015, in which they looked at all these different carcinogens in things that foods are included in there. And in 2015, they labeled processed meat as a group 1 or a class 1 carcinogen. And I say to my patients, what's a group 1 or a class 1 carcinogen? That class includes tobacco, so we know lung cancer, asbestos, asbestosis, plutonium, so radiation. So as you're meal planning and thinking of these things, and I know that you talk about this in First Place for Health, certainly processed foods are processed. So we're talking about bacon and sausage and deli meats and all those things that are processed. So they're definitely associated for various reasons and chemicals that are produced in the processing, and also red meat in its cooking, with colorectal cancer. We know over time colorectal cancer rates have gone up. So therefore, average risk screening has gone down. We screen earlier at 45 instead of 50. So if you want to look up the World Health Organization 2015 guidelines in terms of that, I want you to start thinking, I can get my protein from vegetables. And then there's certainly examples. We think of legumes and beans and soy products and different things like that. So the other thing I want you to take a note of when you look at the My Plate is dairy is now represented as a glass of milk out here, and it says optional. That's an interesting thing. We think of dairy as calcium, and I think we're talking about this a little bit before we went on. And different things, especially dark green leafy vegetables, are very, very rich in calcium. So things like kale, arugula. We think of spinach. Spinach tends not to give up its calcium or allow us to absorb it as well as kale or arugula. But you can get calcium from plant-based sources, so think of that too. So Mediterranean diet, great thing. And plant-based does not necessarily mean vegan. It means primarily most of your diet is based on plants. And then you add in what you like. So think Mediterranean.
Well, I love that, people know for me, I lost over 100 pounds. It's been 12 years since I've kept off over 100 pounds. Praise the Lord, through First Place and eating right. But when I look at red meat too, I just look at the calorie levels, it's a higher, so I choose to have fish and chicken and legumes and, black bean burgers, and even the vegetarian. I don't want to, they make little vegetarian sausage, it is processed, but it's a vegetable. And those are so much lower as a bang for my buck is how I look at it. I think of calories as my budget. So for me, it sounds like I'm on the right track, but it's mostly because I want to get the nutrition, but at a lower calorie. So that's awesome. So
I think that's a great point, because so often when you're trying to cut back your calories, the number one thing people always say is, well, how do I stave off hunger? Because that's always an issue. And I think someone's going to be discussing this during the summit. But, I think, for most of us, if we were able to increase our fiber intakes, we automatically, and drink adequate amounts of water. Let me add that there, because lots of fiber without water is a problem for your gut. So if you're drinking adequate amounts of water and getting a higher fiber diet, you're going to be helping your colon health, and you're going to be staying fuller for longer. And so I always sometimes like to challenge my patients, particularly those who tell me I'm always hungry every time I try to cut my calories, to pick a day or two out of the week that you're going to primarily focus on non-meat versions of getting your protein, because meat can be very constipating. So if that's a problem you're struggling with, increasing your water, cutting back on the meat, and trying to increase those high fiber type foods can actually help a lot with that and with your weight loss.
Right. Well, I have a group of people, and I was telling them, look, we eat primarily vegetable-based foods, but I like prime rib. And so on Christmas, we have prime rib, so I was trying to say, but mostly if you looked at my tracker, you would see it looks more vegetarian, but I still have it, it's like a special occasion food kind of a thing for me. Anyway, we look at beef as a special occasion food. So,
As does most of the world. Beef is expensive.
well, there you
So,
go. Good idea.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Dr. Saundra, you did touch on something that I was the fiber and the protein and not being hungry. And I thought, getting into gut health, it was one of the things that I brought you guys. I thought, I love this, that they talk about this. And so one of the questions, I just wanted to talk about gut health. And for some of us that, like, I know people get on antibiotics and their gut gets all messed up, but there's some people that just, period, their gut doesn't work the best. So what are some recommendations on how we can have a well-working gut?
Yeah, this is a problem for a lot of people, and they suffer in silence, for lack of a better way of putting it, because as you mentioned, no one really talks about it. And honestly, if their doctor doesn't specifically bring it up regarding their colon cancer screening, they may still not bring it up. I find most of the time there's probably three things that I'm seeing with most of my patients that interfere with their gut health. One of them is antibiotics, that, as you mentioned, basically anything that changed the bacterial flora, or kind of, to make it simplified, the healthy bacteria that are supposed to be in your bowels at all time. So there's supposed to be a normal amount of healthy bacteria that's in that system. And antibiotics sometimes kill the good bacteria and then lets the bad bacteria kind of take over the system. And when that happens, you can have anything from belly cramps to excessive amounts of gas to constipation. I mean, it can manifest in many different ways, but at the core issue is that basically the bad bacteria have taken over. That's where probiotics and yogurt and buttermilk and kefir and all of those kind of foods can be beneficial, because they naturally have some healthy bacterial cultures within those dairy products that can put the good back in and help them take back over the system. So that's one thing that I do see, the bacterial shift related to those antibiotics. Another one usually has to do with just poor water consumption. Coffee is not water. I don't care what anybody tells you. Tea is not water. Sprite is not water. I know it's clear, but it's not water. So the body is primarily made of water. So I'm not sure where we got the thought process that if that's primarily what we're made of, we can do without it. I mean, it's essential for your health. And I think we have to understand that there is a certain amount of water that our bodies need to function properly. Everything from our blood pressure to our bowel movements to our circulatory and neurological systems are all needing, and your hormones are all needing a certain amount of water to process properly. And I find that most people do not come near to getting enough water. They are chronically dehydrated. If your mouth feels dry right now while you're listening to this, I can already tell you're dehydrated. I don't care how many times you're going to the bathroom. You should not feel thirsty all day long. That's not normal. And then the third part of that I'm seeing very frequently is a lack of fiber. People hate vegetables. I don't know what it is. And I live in the South. And let me tell you this, if a vegetable is deep fried in batter, it can no longer count as a vegetable. I don't know what to call it, but it's not a vegetable anymore, because you've stripped away everything that is good and holy from that vegetable, and it can't do what it's supposed to do. So even when we're talking about vegetables, and yes, some vegetables, need to be cooked, there needs to be a certain amount of raw roughage that you're consuming, whether that's, celery. I don't even care if you dip it in something, but celery or some steamed broccoli or a salad, but you need to have a certain amount of roughage in your diet. It almost works as like a toothbrush inside your colon. It's going to go through and scrub down some of the bad stuff on its way through and help remove some of that stuff from your system. But if all of your vegetables have to be overcooked and deep fried, you're really missing a huge benefit of why you're eating the vegetables in the first place.
Wow. I love the toothbrush analogy. I like that. I'm going to use that one.
Probably too graphic, but
We're friends here. We could talk about these things. I love it.
Well, one of the things I was telling you guys that I hear from people all the time that join First Place and we get into eating more fiber and eating more, drinking a lot more water is I have to go to the bathroom so much more than I did before. And they actually see it as a problem. And I've heard Dr. Liz talk about this. So I wanted her, could you tell us what's normal? Like what I think what happens is our body is returning to normal and they just don't realize it.
This topic is so fabulous, and I love what Dr. Saundra was saying. I wanted to go back to a couple of things, and then I'll mention about the gastrocolic reflex that you're alluding to, Helen. In my office, I keep my water bottle there, and part of it is to say, look, I haven't drunk yet, but by the end of the day, I'm going to drink a liter, and by the time I get home, I'm going to drink the second liter. But that's how I gauge the coffee intake too. And the way I phrase it to my patients is to say, you should be drinking at least 2 liters a day of non-caffeinated fluid. And then people typically say that I don't like the taste of water. And then there's different things they could do to help that with crystal light and different things. But I just let them know it could be predominantly water, but if you do caffeine, you'll get dehydrated, as Dr. Saundra was saying. Something else that she mentioned, because I like the toothbrush analogy too, and I talk about fiber brushing things, because actually with regards to colon cancer, there is a phenomenon of direct toxic effect when toxins are directly in contact with the colonic mucosa. That just means the tissue in the colon, and it sits there. So if somebody is not having regular bowel movements, which we're going to define a bowel movement after each meal, which the medical term for that is called the gastrocolic reflex, then the stool will sit there. And I want you to think about this. If there's stool that's there that has some toxins and some metabolites that your body is trying to get rid of, and you haven't gone to the bathroom for a day or two, those toxins are in direct contact to your colon, and that's increased colon cancer risk. So I want you to think of that. So the gastrocolic reflex, some people say, oh, I eat and then I feel like it goes right through me, because in about 20 to 90 minutes, that's roughly about when people get this increased movement of their colon. We call that peristalsis. Your colon is trying to help you go to the bathroom. And it's like this: when you eat, your stomach gets distended and some chemicals are released that go down in your bloodstream to your colon. It makes your colon move more. Basically, your colon's talking to your gut. So gastro is stomach, and colon, colonic, gastrocolic reflex. It's saying, hey, colon, evacuate, because in about 4 hours, you're going to get another food bolus. And I tell patients, because some people, and you know what, some of the, especially young people, I don't know why it is, it seems like young girls, they don't go to the bathroom a whole lot. And they might go like twice a week. And I say, how many times do you eat? 3 times a day? Maybe they eat once a day. So if they go 3 times a week, eating once a day, there's 3 meals there if they haven't gone to the bathroom. And then I tell my patients, it's not like it just goes into liquid and you absorb everything. You absorb nutrients, but then you have to evacuate the waste, and you don't want those toxins to be there, potentially toxic to your colon. So the gastrocolic reflex. I've had patients come in and say, my family say, they all say I go to the bathroom too much. And I say, you're the normal one, and give them an applause. So that is normal to feel those little cramps. And if they haven't gone to the bathroom and they've skipped, those cramps will be more uncomfortable, but they will go away. And then I also tell patients the stool will sit there. And as the stool's sitting there, the colon is also a dehydrator. One of its jobs is to reabsorb fluid so that you do not get dehydrated. And the fecal matter, the stool matter, will get drier every time, and it'll get harder. It'll be a vicious cycle.
Yeah,
Dr. Liz brought up a great point I want to make sure people heard, because some people, it kind of went in one ear and probably went out the other. She talked about when you're ready to have a bowel movement, your body will have these cramps, almost like it's the peristalsis, the movement of the gut kind of getting ready to evacuate. What happens though, if you ignore it, which is what many people do, I'm at the office, I'm at work, I'm sitting in
Mhm.
class, I'm whatever. I don't want to be
Mhm.
bothered by by a bowel movement right now. Or like my son told me one time, Mom, I don't want to have to go at school. It's at school. If you ignore it, your body will learn to ignore it. And so it
Mm,
will get to a point where it doesn't even, you don't really feel it anymore. And the longer you
Mhm.
get to where you ignore it, it's not that your body's not telling you that you have to go. It's just decided that you're not going to obey what it's telling you. And so it doesn't continue that process for as long. So get into the habit when you start increasing your fiber and you start eating more, drinking more, and you start feeling that movement that you mentioned, don't ignore it. Actually act in the moment. Take a moment, because the quicker you respond to it, the faster your bowel movements will be. You won't be sitting on the toilet for 15 minutes praying for God to release whatever's blocked up in there. You'll be able to actually go quicker, and you'll be able to do that
Mhm.
after meal release. That should happen because your body will be trained to do it.
yay. Now, Dr. Liz, I heard you talk about there's some kind of scale on what kind of, can you talk about the scale?
Yes,
Not the weight scale.
the Bristol stool scale. This is a very interesting thing. You could Google it to look at the pictures. It's a scale from 1 to 7, and it rates the form of stool. And believe it or not, there's a normalcy as to how soft or how formed stool should be. So if you think of that scale, number one, I call rabbit pellets. So little, and I know I'm getting graphic, so I do refer you to look up the pictures. Small amounts. So some patients that I could tell by their history, they sound constipated. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I went." And I'll ask them what was it like. So it'll be small amounts, and they still feel like there's retained stool and they have not evacuated. At the other extreme, it's liquid. So normal is somewhere in between. It's what we call a 4. Well, what's a 4? You're going to love soft serve ice cream. So maybe that'll help you in other ways. But it should come out. Some people say it looks like a snake, but it should be, as Dr. Saundra said, very easy. Your body's trained so you don't have to bear down so much. So you don't have to have a baby. You just go, your pelvic, your anal muscles relax, your pelvic floor relaxes. You get into, you know, you're able to go. I know we're getting graphic here again, but we're amongst friends.
Well, I asked and I wanted to know, I've heard you talk about it, and I find it, I love the scientific part of our body. Like I am thankful that people have explained it, that I heard you talk about it before. I was like, I gotta share this with everybody. This is an important stuff that not too many people are going to talk about this, so, but that's okay. I think we want to talk about it because it impacts us. And I think knowing what normal is a good thing. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. You know, I wanted to mention one other thing because Dr. Sandra mentioned an important thing about probiotics. I want you to think about eating fruits and vegetables as prebiotics. One of my nutritionist friends talks about if you eat the right foods, fruits and vegetables, and fiber, those prebiotics are the substrate that the good bacteria in your gut need in order to flourish. So, yes, you can eat probiotics, the actual good bacteria, but if you feed the good bacteria that are there with fruits and vegetables, then that could help them grow. And you could outnumber the bad bacteria. When you get a course of antibiotics, it knocks out your good bacteria for a month. So some people get multiple courses of antibiotics back to back, then they run into other problems, and some people might have experienced those overgrowth of bad bacteria.
yeah, I think the a probiotic, where people are used to hearing that, but prebiotics is such a,
Prebiotics.
yeah, and that goes
Mhm.
with eating healthy. That's what, to me, I hear
Exactly.
eat healthy, eat your fruits and vegetables.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yes.
All right. What else? What's something else that we could, we talked about blood pressure and stuff, but how does the choices of food we make impact us in other ways? As far as, we have a lot of diabetics and pre-diabetics, and for, they come looking for help and stuff. So any advice on that way, how our body uses food to help us with insulin and stuff like that?
I would think most people who have any type of diabetes or pre-diabetes are probably familiar with the glycemic index, but basically it's just evaluating how certain carbohydrates clear your bloodstream and just being aware that certain carbohydrates are better if you're diabetic for you than others. For example, I think a lot of people are aware, we're going to avoid white sugar, white flours, white potatoes, those type of things. Not necessarily that you could never have them again, but that if given an option, something that's going to take longer time to clear your bloodstream is more likely to make it, first of all, help you feel full for longer. And it's going to keep your blood sugar from spiking because of the insulin response related to it. So I think that's probably one of the things that I find that I have to work with people on the most. We're all raised kind of certain ways. So if you're raised and most of your diet includes rice, then and regular white rice, it's not very difficult to switch over to brown, but you just have to be aware that that's a healthier choice for you in most situations. And so just kind of looking at for yourself some substitutions that you can make. I find that that's easier for most people than trying to have them completely switch their diet when they're first starting off. Find some simple substitutions. Another substitution, if you're someone who's like, I don't like vegetables, I don't like, I don't eat vegetables, how am I going to fit that in? There's so many ways now that you can use like cauliflower to replace potatoes, to replace rice. So you're adding the vegetable and getting rid of the white rice and the white potatoes with something that's going to actually help you with the fiber, help you with the vitamins, help you with a lot of things. And you basically just insert that bag of riced cauliflower in the place of whatever that thing was. So, look for some simple solutions. I think we make it harder than it really needs to be sometimes. And if we can just kind of simplify with some healthier substitutions, that'll help a lot of people be able to get on their journey faster.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. I love the cauliflower. My family, because I will like to offer healthy options. So like say at Thanksgiving, we have regular mashed potatoes, and then we have another bowl of mashed potatoes that's half cauliflower mashed, half potatoes. And guess what? Potatoes are always gone. There's no leftovers of the healthier bowl, which is funny how that is. But I like that because I like mashed potatoes, when on special occasions. But halving it with cauliflower is so like I can have more, So.
And if you have kids, kids, they, for the most part, when I do that with my kids, they don't know the difference. If I don't make a big deal about, half of it has cauliflower, half is regular potatoes, they don't really know the difference. They're just like, these potatoes have a little bit of a different flavor. And I'm like, yeah, that's garlic. They're like, oh, okay. Let's go on with it. So there is garlic in it. I'm not completely lying, but it's like if I don't make a big deal out of it, they don't make a big deal out of it. And then
right.
Now that they're older, I tell them, that's mashed cauliflower. They're like, oh, okay. When they were little, if I told them it was cauliflower, it probably wouldn't have went down.
Right. Well, I like to make zucchini noodles, and so I like it just 100% zucchini noodles. My husband will have pasta and zucchini. I think if you start like kind of blending it, like you said, that's how I got off white rice. Is we made white and brown and mixed it together because it's hard. The texture is so different. The whole grain texture is different, and but my whole, after all these years, my whole family, we only have whole grain pasta in the cabinet. We only have brown rice in the cabinet to cook, but it didn't start that way. It was a gradual process to get people used to the texture, because I think that's the hard thing is texture. So, but I think it's the texture that's actually good for us, right? Okay. I think we've talked to most of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to see if there was anything like what's the, I know Dr. Liz is also a body and soul instructor and stuff. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how fitness and exercise and balance, what are some basic things besides walking, which seems to be when people are first starting is with, but what are some basic things they can do to get stronger and help themselves as they're getting started? So what recommendations do you have that we could say, try this?
Excellent. Helen, I'm like just honored to serve as a body and soul instructor with you. And that aspect, you know, we touched on calcium a little bit earlier. When women are thinking as time goes on about bone health, one of the things, actually, the main thing that I talk to patients out in the community trying to preserve or strengthen their bones about, I don't necessarily say take a calcium supplement, because we don't necessarily recommend calcium supplements for average risk community dwelling out there women. We talk about moderate weight bearing exercise and strength training. So a lot of people, as you said, Helen, they walk for cardio. Walking's great. When people say they walk, then I'll give them that fit acrostic. Okay, you've been walking. Let's do what Emerald, the chef, says. Let's kick it up a notch. And that acrostic, FITT, is pick one of these things or more than that. Frequency, change the frequency, the intensity, the timing, the duration of exercise, and the type of exercise. But I'll add in, for the walking, we'll try to interval it 30, 20, 10. So 30 seconds, walk your normal amount, 20 seconds, walk a little faster, 10 seconds, go as fast as you can. And some people could get to the point where they might even run, for those people who could, for the 10 seconds, and then repeat that interval 8 times, and then catch your breath after that. That would be in that realm of HIIT, or high intensity interval training. The one thing I tell my patients is high intensity interval training does not mean high impact. It doesn't mean necessarily running or jumping or my knees hurt, doc, or my hips hurt. You don't have to interval. You're a swimmer, totally non-weight bearing. So you could certainly interval swimming, go faster and then slower, faster and slower, and pick your own interval time. One of the things that you'll hear people talk about, and for patients beginning exercise, if they walk, I'll tell them 30, 20, 10. If they do other types of exercise, I'll use the word Tabata and I'll say, Google it, pick your exercise, so that they could start thinking and being creative as to what kinds of exercises they like to do. And I know you're familiar with it, Helen. And Tabata is the name of the Japanese researcher who developed, with spinning, with biking, the interval of 20 seconds, work hard, 10 seconds rest, repeat 8 times back to back, equaling 4 minutes. And then catching your breath 2 to 4 minutes, going back to normal, and then doing 2 more Tabata intervals. That is a great way 3 times a week, especially they've studied it in diabetics, to kick up your metabolism. So you could do the efficiency, the nice efficiency of HIIT training is you don't need an hour. You don't have to walk an hour on the treadmill. You could exercise for 15 or 20 minutes, but you work harder, you intensify it. And then it could be 3 short workouts a week, and you are still burning calories even when you're not exercising. So it doesn't have to be every day, or if you're time constrained, or if you're traveling and hotel constrained, you could do HIIT type workouts or interval workouts wherever you are. One of our other colleagues, Hilda, she posted on social media this week, she was doing intervals in the airport waiting for her plane, which was a great thing to do. So I encourage folks watching, you could also use things at home to start your strength training. So a milk carton, a jug of water, cans of vegetables to start. And a nice thing to think of, if you're watching TV, commercials are like 3 or 4 minutes. That's a good time if you think of that Tabata interval I mentioned, 20 seconds fast, 10 seconds slower, and repeat 8 times, that's 4 minutes. So I tell people in the office, you could do this and then do that as fast as you can, speed bag, get some cardio in, do squats, getting up out of the chair. And then that would be a nice little workout you could do and work it into your everyday life.
You could even just get up and out of the chair, up, down,
exactly.
Up, down. That's like,
yes.
you
Yes,
could
chair
just
squat.
get up and just sitting down and
Yes.
up.
Yes. Go get something from upstairs and come back down. You forgot something else. Don't get all four things together. Do it four times. One thing at a time during the commercial. That's a good interval.
It's so interesting. I've heard recently a new thing about when they put you in the nursing home, it's not because you're sick, it's because you can't get out of a chair. And I thought that was such good,
Mm.
like, advice. It's oftentimes not because you're sick, it's because you've lost your strength and you can't stand up by yourself. So I want to be standing up and down, like, until I go to heaven. That's how I'm like, I want to be able to
Amen.
stand straight up until I go to heaven. So that's so good,
Amen.
Liz. I also wanted to just say, I went to this one church conference, and I went to just a class they had in the morning to exercise, because I like to exercise. And we were in a gym, and he had people on ellipticals, stair climbers, treadmills, and we did Tabatas all in one group. Everybody was on different machines, and he just had us all doing intervals, going as fast as we could, and then the resting. And I was like, you could do a Tabata anywhere on anything. And I
Mhm.
do intervals in swimming, as you know. Like, I pray when I swim, but then there's times like, okay, I need to go as fast as I can, right? For
Mhm.
so, because I swim with three other ladies, and one lady will go, wow, what happened to you? You like zoomed ahead there for a little while, but it's not
Mhm.
something you can usually sustain. So
Mhm. I
that's
also meant, I was going to say, dog walking. Some people will say, I do, I have a dog. And so I'll say, okay, so when you walk the dog, how fast did you walk, or show me in the office, and then I'll show them what, like 3.5 miles an hour, what it kind of looks like. But I'll say, when the dog stops, and we've been talking about GI things, so when the dog stops to do their thing, you don't stop. You do some step out jumping jacks, you do some squats, you do some speed bags, you do some punches, do something that gets your breathing up to that perceived exertion where you feel a little winded when you say a sentence, or you feel a little winded when you say a short phrase. That's how you should feel. So your dog walking is going to be intensified. Don't wait for the dog, do some exercise. You could say, dog, take your time. I'm here doing a Tabata. Wait.
I love that. And I love that you both are instructors for Body and Soul. I actually don't have, I live in a very small town in Alabama, and there's not a Body and Soul instructor near me. So I actually subscribe to Body and Soul TV. And so for some of you who might be
Awesome.
thinking the same thing, I don't know
Mhm.
any instructors near me. What I love about it is all of their sessions are 25 minutes roughly. And so I'm not a fan of like traditional exercises. And so they have something called Dance Blast, and they do every type of, I mean, from hip hop to Latin to you name it, to freestyle. I mean, there's so that, and I think that's what I tend to tell my patients. You do you. For exercise, it has to be something that you want to do and that you choose to do on a regular basis. And so if you're the kind of person who's like, I don't like traditional exercise, find some kind of dance or boxing, or like Helen does, swimming, or whatever it is. It's got to be something that you want to do, because you're going to have to
Mhm.
choose it on a regular basis to make it a consistent part of your life.
Mhm.
amen. You have to choose it. You have to prioritize that. Well,
Mhm.
do either one of you want to say any final words? I think we're wrapping up. I am just so thankful for your sharing and your wisdom. I didn't know if there was any last inspirational things you wanted to say.
Well, I don't have anything specific. I mean, I'm thankful for First Place for Health. I'm thankful for the ministry of you guys have, because I feel like, right now that's something that a lot of people struggle with. The United States is more obese now than we've ever been, and COVID
Mhm.
did not help a thing. If anything, it just made the whole situation worse. So I think being able to combine that spiritual component to why it's so important to maintain our health is so needed right now.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree. And that lifestyle pill, we've been talking a lot about the exercise and nutrition, but Dr. Saundra's book about sacred rest, big thing. And she has so much wisdom in that. But if you get the book so you understand, because it's related also to medical things that we talk about, the pre-diabetics and the diabetics, cortisol and other hormones. If you're curious or you've heard about those things, stress management and sleep are vital elements in that lifestyle pill that we have not discussed here, but Dr. Saundra talks about very, very well in that book. And I recommend it to my patients so that you don't miss any parts of the lifestyle pill.
I love it. I got it as an
Mhm.
audiobook and got to listen to Dr. Saundra read the book to me. And it was awesome. And I've met her in person and stuff. So it was such an awesome, I'm just saying, I do it. I listen to audiobooks when I'm out doing all the yard work and gardening. It's a way that I can listen and I'm doing things and I'm not distracted. I tried to listen to her book when I was working. And the very first chapter is that you can't multitask or do this. And it's so funny. I was like, oh, okay. So I found something else that I could do to listen to Sacred Rest. So I agree. Rest is an important health thing that we could have a whole another talk. And Dr. Saundra has talked to us about it. So thank you, Liz. I thank you for raising that up. That's awesome.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, I am just honored to have these two ladies in my, I feel like I could reach out to them and ask them any kind of question and they would help me find the right resource. And so I hope that you enjoyed this talk, and we're glad to help answer any other questions you might have. And we just appreciate Liz and Saundra, Dr. Liz, Dr. Saundra. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Helen. Aloha.
Aloha.